the business cheat any of the consumer, that means what? The consumer will never come back to the business. Go with their code of conduct, their standard, and if they will not maintain the standard, then they are being punished in the eyes of law. If there is a sudden hike in the price, the government will actually go with two concepts. Anybody who have consumed the product, anybody who have used the product, if they feel that, they can actually complain. Hello everybody, a warm welcome to one and all. I'm Abhilash Chandra from the Department of Business Studies in Vidhyaashram PU College, the Temple of Excellence. Now here you need to understand about this session where you will get to know the concept about ways and means of consumer protection. That is, what are the ways a consumer is being protected, what are the factors which influence the consumer to get a protection, and what exactly the consumer should get from these things. The first one is self-regulation of business. The first and the most prominent point is the business should also know about their ethical moral values. That means they shouldn't cheat. The ethics of a business or the morale is what? They shouldn't cheat the customer, because the customer is for a long term. He should be there in the business, only then the business can have more profit. The next thing is business associations. There are many associations which are always there to check whether there is any fraudulent thing is happening or not. Next one is you have consumer awareness. There should be an aware within the consumer, that is, what is he doing, whether the product is good or bad, whether the seller is exploiting him or not, whether they have a fair deal or not. So here what happens is they should always go with a fair deal. They should always go with a fair deal. Next one we have is consumer organizations. There are too many organizations which will safeguard the consumer. The last one is, after all these things, there is somebody called the boss, that is the government, because we are in a democratic country where the public should not be cheated by anybody. So there will be a government intervention and the government will take care of any fraudulent things happens in the market by the seller or even by the consumer. So the first one we went with, that is a self-regulation by business. Here what happens is, always understand, business is always for a long term. So if once the business cheat any of the consumer, that means what? The consumer will never come back to the business. Understand the simple concept. You can cheat a person once or twice or thrice, but the fourth time you can't cheat the same person. So what happens is, the person whoever has got cheated by you, he will definitely tell his relatives, friends, people whom he knows, and he'll tell about your product, your company. Now what happens is, you will lose your goodwill in the market in a long term. That's why you are not supposed to do it. So you should have a self-regulation. That is, you should always have code of conduct, moral values, ethical values, principles, and then you are supposed to do the business. Enlightened business firm realize that it is in their long-term relationship or the interest to serve the consumers well. That's why I always tell you that in a market, the real king is not the seller but the consumer. The next one here we have is socially responsible. See, any business, whatever the business is, only if they are socially responsible, they'll always have a very good will. They'll always have a very good goodwill. Now, social responsibility firms follow ethical standards. What is that they'll follow? They'll go with ethical values, ethical practices, ethical standards, and practices in dealing with their customers, always they go with it. And here what happens is, if something happened unknowingly, then they'll go with redressal. They'll go with what? Redressal. Next one is business association. So we have few of the associations within India where they are always there to check whether the business is going with their code of conduct or not. If they are not going with the code of conduct, then they are being punished by their law. The one thing here is the associations of trade. Say example, commerce and business, like Federation of India. We have Federation of India, Chamber of Commerce in India. So FICCI, they are the one who will check, and they'll have their own code of conduct. And people need to actually practice whatever the code of conduct or the rules regulation which have been laid by FICCI, rules and regulations. So the associations of trade, commerce and business, like Federal of Indian Chamber and Commerce of India, and one more is there called CII, that is called Confederation of Indian Industries. Now what happens is, they have laid down their code of conduct. And people are supposed to go with their code of conduct, their standard, and if they will not maintain the standard, then they are being punished in the eyes of law. Next one we have is consumer awareness. Now consumers should also have few of the things, right? Now without that, what happens is, whatever the consumer goes and buy from the seller, and if he gets cheated, it's a prime responsibility of a consumer to know about the product, know about the information, know about the pricing, manufacturing date, expiry date, all those things before dealing with any of the business. A consumer who is well informed about his rights and relief in the sense redressal available to him, would be in a position to raise his voice against any unfair trade practice. See, whatever this consumer protection is there, it is only for what? To avoid unfair trade practice. So here the consumer, only when he is aware about it, he knows about the product, he knows what are the dealings which happens, he knows about the price, quality, quantity, everything. If there is any unfair trade practice, then only he can voice his name. See example, there is product A and product B. Say we have in Mysore and we have in Bangalore. Now product A, which is in Mysore, it is sold for 70 rupees and product B for 100 rupees. Now Bangalore, what is that? It should be the same thing, that is 70 and 100. Usually what happens, a fluctuation of 1 rupee or 2 rupee will happen, but if the product has been written, that is the MRP is written, called MRP, then what happens is, wherever it goes, it should be the same thing, but they can't actually charge more than 70 or more than 100. Here more than 100 or more than 70. If any of the places they go with more than the charge of MRP, it is a right of the consumer to actually voice out and then go with the proper thing, and they can sue the seller as well as the people who are encouraging this to happen. And here what happens is, you should always know that unscrupulous. Now unscrupulous means not being honest. What is it? It means what? Not being honest. It's a new word. You should always use the new words, and please write it in your pocket dictionary kind of a thing. And people should not get exploited. The way people get exploited, because of not knowing the real fact. Next one we have is consumer organizations. There are too many organizations which actually go with what they are supposed to do, what they are not supposed to do. Malpractice will happen, fraudulent things will happen. Here the consumer doesn't know anything about the product, so the seller will actually take that as an advantage and he'll exploit the consumer. So the consumer organization should be there, which can actually educate the consumer, which can actually educate the consumer so that they can avoid malpractices and exploitation of consumers. So these organizations can force business firm to avoid malpractices and exploitation of consumers. So I've told you in the session 1 what are the organizations which are always there to help, and even in session 2 I have told you about the legal formalities, how the people are being protected. So these are the organizations which are always there to help the consumer at large. I also spoke about 3 of the forum where you can actually lodge. One is the district forum, then you have state forum, and then you have national forum. Understand here what happens is, any of the compensation which you are supposed to get or you will claim to get, now you can go and file your case in district forum, but the thing should be, the compensation should be above 0 rupee to 20 lakh. How much? From 0 to 20 lakh. More than 20 lakh you cannot claim in district forum. When it comes to state forum, it is above 20 lakh to 1 crore. It goes to about 20 lakh to 1 crore. And next one, the last one you have is national forum, where anything above 1 crore, anything above 1 crore, you can actually go and claim for those things. So this consumer organizations will help the business to check the business whether they are going with a legal formality or they are going with malpractices. The government, whatever happens, the government is always there to be in the safer side. The government will introduce too many laws, too many acts. So we have the Consumer Protection Act 1986, then we have Contract Act 1982. The same way you have Agricultural Product, that is 1937. There are so many things which the government is taking initiative only to avoid and reduce the malpractices done by the sellers to the consumers. The government can protect the interests of the consumer by enacting various legislations. Now I'll tell you what happens here in the government. We have called Lok Sabha and we have Rajya Sabha. If you remember this Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha we call them as the lower house, and Rajya Sabha is called as upper house. Now here what happens is, the Lok Sabha are the people who get elected directly by the people, and Rajya Sabha, the members are elected indirectly. But what it is, directly or indirectly they are being elected by the public. So it is their responsibility that the public should not get affected or exploited or used in a wrong sense. So what is that they should do? They should always go and implicate the regulations. What is that they should do? They should always go with regulations. That regulations which protect the interest of the customer. Now understand here, the legal framework in India encompasses various legislations which provide protection to consumer. Why is that they should do? Because we are democratic. Why? We are democratic. Even in the country where democracy isn't there, if they are capitalistic or they are socialistic or they go with their own communist parties, whatever it is, the consumer, who's that consumer? Now consumer should always be protected, right? Now understand the reason why the government will actually intervene. If there is a sudden hike in the price, the government will actually go with two concepts. Why there is a sudden hike in the price? The hike in the price will always go with demand, right? In any of the business, it's only two way. One is demand and the second is supply. Now definitely when there is a less supply, the demand for the product increases. But if there is a in fluctuation, that means there is some kind of a fluctuation which is not moderate, which is not normal, it is totally abnormal, then only the government will come and then the government will go with their regulation. But I'll tell you what it is. The government should always go with a concept called prevention is better than cure. Before the fraudulent things will happen, what is that you should do is you need to have regulations and you need to frame it and then you need to implement those as an act. Only then the sellers, whoever are selling the product, will not exploit the public at large. You have food adulteration, you have weighing and measuring act, you have so many other things which the government has done only for the safety of the consumer. So this is what the government should do. The next one is, the question for you is, who can file a complaint? Who can actually file a complaint? The answer is anybody who have consumed the product, anybody who have used the product, if they feel that, they can actually complain. So any consumer can complain. Any consumer. There is no differentiation with gender or color or anything. There should be no discrimination. Anybody can actually go and he can file a case. Next thing is, any registered consumer association, even they can file the case on behalf of the consumer or on behalf of the association, but they should be registered. What is the criteria here? They should get registered. Only then they can form their consumer association. There are too many consumer associations which are not registered, but here what happens is they will not file a case on behalf of the association, but they'll file a case on behalf of the consumer. Next is the central government or any state government, they can also file a case only when they feel that there is a malpractice, there is a adulteration, there is a fraudulent thing which is happening. Then the central government or the state government will take initiative and they can file a complaint. One or more consumers, understand here the criteria is on behalf of numerous consumers, anybody, right, anybody can actually go and he can complain. But what it should be, having the same interest. It should not be a different interest. Now there are 100 consumers who have been cheated by that particular seller. Now any one or few of the consumers, they can actually go and file a case on behalf of the entire mob. The next one is a legal heir or representative of a deceased consumer. Supposingly a consumer who has used a product and he is no more. Now who can actually file a case? That is his son or his relatives, whoever wants to represent him after he is dead. Then they can go and they can file a case, and then if the seller is being found guilty, then he will go with compensation as well as he will go with the long term in jail. So these are the things which you are supposed to know. Who are supposed to complain? One is any consumer or any registered consumer association. The central government or the state government can go for it. The next one here is on behalf of numerous consumer, any one or few consumers can go and they can actually file a case. And the last one is the deceased heir, in the sense the son or the daughter, whoever it is, the wife or relatives or people who want to represent, they can actually go and file a case on behalf of the deceased. So these are the things which you are supposed to know. In this session, we got to know what are the things and who are the people who can actually go for complaining. So if you feel that you are supposed to complain against any of the seller in this town or city or in this state, then you can aramse go and you can lodge a complaint. There are three things which you should know. One is the district forum, then you have the state forum, and then the last one you have national forum. Any of these forums you can go and you can have your redressal, that is compensation, and you can benefit out of it. But here what it is, you should have a valid proof and then you are supposed to go and take it. That's why students, whenever you go and shop in any of the things, the one thing what you should do is always check the bill, how much the items you have taken. You need to tally with the items which you are taking to your home, and then everything is matched, only then you are supposed to leave from that store. So these are the things which as a consumer you are supposed to know. Jago grahak, jago. Until then, I'll see you when I see you.